All right, Greg, we are live. We are live on X. We're live, and people are watching DeFi Dungeons right now. Greg, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Thanks for everyone to show up.
Yeah, man. Excited to deep dive DeFi Dungeons and give us a TLDR. What's happening? Give us a TLDR on how to get started and everything. I think there's been you guys have always been cooking and always shipping. And I could see based on the screen already that there's been some updates. So, man, break it down to us.
Yeah, you got it. So I'll try to keep this as high level as possible. I'll probably go into some granular details too, but we can always have a follow-up session if we want to get deeper into the weeds. But just to give a quick overview, so DeFi Dungeons, we launched in April of this year. So it's been about 8 months or so. And DeFi Dungeons is effectively like an idle RPG. So it has aspects of idle games, but also various like themes of RPG, which you'll see as we go through. It's launched just on Solana, so we're not bridged to any other chains. And DeFi Dungeons was also created by the same company that created Play the Heist, so Longwood Labs. So a little high-level explanation of DeFi Dungeons there. Before I start to jump in more granularly of like the details of what it is and kind of what makes it the way it is there anything specific that you want to touch on before we do?
I always like to tell people, like, people are always new, first time joining, and they're going to see and they're going to be like, okay, what is this? Like TLDR, always like to give them like that 90-second, like 120-second, like what it is. And like, maybe like always good, always like references so that people could be like, okay, like it's something like this.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so high level, and we'll dive into all of these things a bit more here shortly. The premise is DeFi Dungeons is an idle RPG game. You have characters that you'll want to effectively go into dungeons to get loot so that you can get tokens, you can progress your characters. There's effectively 3 different game modes for the dungeons. There are dungeons, which are the easiest sort of game mode that you'll be able to do. There's mythics. These are the hard mode dungeons effectively. And then there's raids, which are quite a bit more complex and intricate, and we'll kind of dig into what those entail as we go through. But just quickly as well, there's different types of characters for DeFi Dungeons. So there's what we'll call the adventurers. So these are your warriors, marksmen, mages, and priests. These are the more active characters. They're the ones that will be participating in the dungeons, the mythics, and the raids. They'll be earning the loot. They have equipment. They have stats. We'll touch on all of that here shortly. There's also another character type called they're more passive, and they're called the merchants and the bankers. So you can see them here as well. And effectively, the more passive characters are just earning or reaping the rewards of the adventurers doing the dungeons, mythics, and raids. But if you really want to dig in and like dive into DeFi Dungeons, you're going to want at least one adventurer. The classes don't matter too much in dungeons and mythics. It's just a theming thing more so there. But there are some differences, especially when you get into raids. So I'll pause there really quick. Anything you want to? Should I keep flowing, or you want to stop me on anything?
Nah, just love kind of figuring out what the alpha is there, so how to level up the fastest and not die.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. So let me jump into dungeons. I'll explain these a bit more. So as I mentioned, dungeons are the easiest and like the lowest risk kind of content that you can do. I'll jump into the third dungeon just to kind of show things a little bit more holistically. Within each dungeon, there's 3 points of interest. So there's an info board that's going to give you all the details for that specific dungeon. There's the boss. This is how you send and claim your NFTs. And there's also a chest that shows what other players have earned while they've gone through these dungeons. One thing I'll call out, by the way, I do have 2 tabs open. I might jump back and forth. This is a lower environment that I'm in currently. This is staging. Some of the numbers might look a little funky, but I'll kind of call that out as we go. So if I click on this dungeon info board, it gives me all of, actually, let me actually jump to production here. So it's a little bit more on point, all the data. It gives me all of the information I need to know about each of these bosses in the specific dungeon. So I know that in Dungeon 3, Ancient Tombs, in order to kill the Abyssal Wraith, it's going to require 8 hours, right? Based on the dungeon, it may require more or less time. So just keep that in mind. But you'll also notice that there's negative events here. So there is a chance that something bad may happen to me along the way of these dungeons. So in this case, and these vary based on the dungeons as well, there's a chance for your items to break, which we'll talk about here shortly, the actual items. There's a chance to become injured and you have to pay gold or wait the duration to go back in the dungeon. But I can also see all of the loot that these bosses drop. And the loot is different based on the boss. But you'll see that here in Dungeon 3, I can get an access key. So this gets me into the next dungeon. The way these dungeons work, they're effectively a funnel. So I can't get into Dungeon 4 until I get this key. And I can't get the Dungeon 5 key until I do Dungeon 4. So it's effectively a funnel. You want to think about that as you go through your strats. But on the loot front, this is all of the items that you can get and you can sell for gold. That is our in-game token. So there's a few different caveats here that I'll kind of talk about. Stats influence how you get these as well. But you'll notice here that this bag that I can get from this dungeon, I can sell this for gold. So gold is the central piece of the entire game. It's how you purchase your stats. It's how you get talents. It's how you can buy other equipment and items from other players, which we'll talk about as well. And there's a few lottery items as well that you can get. These are very low drop rates, but you'll see that, for example, this King's Ghost is a 600 gold drop item versus the 24 gold bag. And then this one right here, the Phantom Elixir, is a 3,000 gold item that can be sold. This one's locked behind talents. So there are some items that are locked behind talents as well, just worth keeping in mind. You can acquire gems. So you'll be able to put gems into your weapons and offhand. So this will improve your effectiveness with a specific stat. And then also in Dungeon 3, this is how you get base weapons, like the tier 1 weapons for each of the classes. Again, these do the same things in terms of the stats they give, but they're thematically just a bit different. But essentially, like if you're a warrior, you would acquire these weapons. And if you're a marksman, you would acquire these specific weapons. Now, just kind of pivoting over a bit, I wanted to explain the stats. And then I'm going to also talk through the crafting and then some like character progression as well. So as I mentioned, there's 4 adventurers, so 4 classes for the adventurer. There's the warrior, there's the marksman, there's the mage, and then there's the priest. These are all 3 priests. You can see that with the symbol at the top here, right? If I had talents, you would see the talents here. Nothing yet there, but we'll go and check those out a bit more shortly. Each character also has 3 slots. So you can equip a weapon, you can equip an offhand, and then you can equip a unique item. Okay, so the weapons are class specific. For example, as I mentioned, the priest can only use priest weapons. The warrior must use warrior weapons, but that's really the only difference. And then each character also has 4 stats. So we have combat. This will increase your chances of stealing other players' loot while they're doing dungeons. In raids, this also helps you kill the boss more efficiently. We have Vitality. This reduces the negative events that we talked about before, right? So the chance of the item breaking, chance of injury, these all go down that percentage as the Vitality gets higher. But in raids, this also increases your health, which means you stay alive longer while fighting the bosses. There is Fortune. So this increases your chance to get those token items, those items that can be sold for gold. And then there is Luck. So this increases your chance to get resources, get gems, get unique items, as well as those base equipment that we just talked about as well. Now, just kind of moving from there, as you get those base items, you can then craft. It's really more so upgrading. So as I mentioned, every class has their own set of weapons. You can kind of filter between these different buttons here, but you'll see like the progression of the crafting system. So you start with that gray one, like we saw in the dungeons, and then you can upgrade it to uncommon, so green, and then from there to blue. But effectively, each of these gets more powerful with each tier that you increase. Now, the difference, and I kind of like alluded to this before, but we didn't go into detail, is the difference between these different weapons is the stats they give. So this is where like the first kind of layer of strategy comes into play, because you can think about how you want to play these dungeons, mythics, and raids. So for example, if I wanted to try to get more of those token items more often, I would get the fortune stat here. And eventually this gets super powerful. Like if I go to the last tier, I get 360 fortune versus just the 32 for tier 2. So the progression really curves quite a lot. Now, if I instead wanted the axe, this gives luck. So this would increase my chances of getting the resources. And when you're crafting, you need those resources. So when I click on that, you'll see that I get these stats in dungeons. It requires that gray base axe in the first dungeon. And I need 4 wood, 2 stone, and some gold. So without these materials and resources, you will not be able to craft. So luck is important in getting all of the resources that you need to craft. The Warhammer is more of a balanced weapon, so it gives less overall stats to the 3 stats, but you get vitality, fortune, and luck. Again, vitality reduces your negative events. There's the scimitar. This increases your vitality, so reducing those negative events, but this is a lot more than that Warhammer that we just saw. Okay. Let me truncate this to the warrior. So,
maybe give us
yeah.
like how do players like upgrade these? Like, do they need the token? Like, do they need to be at a certain level? Like, maybe just also walk them through that little bit of that, like while you're going through this.
Yeah, of course. So I kind of touched on that before. So when I click on this, it tells you exactly what you need here. So if we look at the bottom here, I need that tier 1 beginner sword, right? I need 4 wood, which I have. I need 2 stone, and then I need 1,000 gold. So until I have all of those materials and resources, I cannot craft upward. But you'll notice that as I click on these different tiers, the resources change. Some require a little bit more. When I get to the mythic, it requires just these iron, right? So you find these different resources in the different dungeons. I won't go through all of that right now, but you can look at the dungeon loot tables for each of the dungeons, and that will allow you to progress through each of these tiers. These last 3 tiers, these resources are only available in the raids. So you can only get up to tier 7, which is this green one here, with dungeons and mythics. Yep.
Yeah, cool. No, because I was gonna say like my more of a question was like if somebody didn't want to get the tier 1 sword, like can they level up some other ways of like the marketplace buying, like,
yes,
exactly. You know what I mean?
Yep. Exactly. Good segue. So yeah, there are a couple different ways you can go about it. You can either craft your own weapons and offhand yourself. If you're not patient enough, or maybe you want to try a different strategy, you can always go to the item marketplace. So I went into the tavern here. You'll see we have the item marketplace here. Here is like the peer-to-peer kind of auction house between players. So you can find any weapons, any offhands, any unique items, any resources, any gems, all noted here. So you can also sell as well as you get them, as you level them up. But for example, to your question, if I go to, let's say I want to do weapons, I'll say I want to buy, let's say the tier 7. I can then see all the tier 7s that are listed for sale. So it shows me, how many stats they have. Do they have gems equipped here? So that's what these are here. It shows a stat breakdown. It shows how much gold it will cost to buy them. And I can easily just do that. So to your point, if I was like, hey, I don't actually want to go for luck, I'd rather just go for, a fortune weapon, and it's harder for me to get resources, I could get a little gold and just buy one of these flat out. And then I don't have to go through the trouble of having to upgrade them. But of course, like as you get to the higher tiers, they get a little bit more expensive. But this is an easy way to be able to buy and sell your weapons and offhands. Yep.
Yeah, no, appreciate that one. I think that was what, like, giving those beginner 101 stuff sometimes is good for them.
Yeah, for sure. Love it. All right, so let me just go back to crafting really quick. So I kind of touched on all of that. there's the recipes here. As I mentioned, you can filter by the classes. Each of the weapon types has a different stat that it gives. There's also gym equipping. So we just looked at that in the item marketplace. So various items here can be equipped. Let me jump to QA2. I'm sorry, staging, because it's probably a little bit better of an example. All right, here we go. Yeah, so you'll see that you can equip different gems into your weapons. It doesn't matter what type of weapon you have, you can equip any gems. So for example, you might have a combat weapon, but maybe you want to put vitality gems in there, or maybe you want to put luck gems in there, or fortune gems in. So you can really diversify your kind of build out however you want to play. And gems are just one other way that you can kind of diversify that. So that's the gym equipping. And I'm going to jump to the training area. So this is one of the core areas where you can upgrade your character. So there are base stats for characters up to 150. So you'll see that, for example, this character has 150 combat, fortune, vitality, and luck. So he's capped, but I can increase these other ones if I want as well. I can pay gold to do this. So that's one option. Or I can go into training. I can send my characters off to level up a specific stat, and over time, they will increase their base stats more and more up to that 150. So you have two options there. The base stats are super important from a couple different angles, but the most important angle is for talents. So this is pretty detailed. I'll try to keep this a bit higher level so we don't get too pulled into this, but essentially the talents are, you can think of talent trees sort of like World of Warcraft or like Guild Wars, any games like that. There's effectively specialties. So there's 4 talent trees and they're in the theme of the stats. So there's a combat talent tree, a vitality talent tree, a fortune talent tree, and a luck talent tree. And at a very high level, again, we don't have to go through each of these individually. The combat talent tree will allow you to do more damage and kill the bosses more efficiently when in raids. Vitality will increase your health and survivability while in raids. Fortune will increase those token items that you can sell for gold. And luck will increase your chances to get resources, gems, unique items, and those base level 1 weapons and offhands. And it's important to kind of think through this because you only get 8 points, right? So it's not like you can get all 20 points here. You have to like strategically think about, what do you want to do? What do you want to be proficient in? And you can spread those 8 points however you want. It could be 5 and 3. It could be 4 and 2 and 2. It could be 2, 2, 2, 2. Whatever you want. But these talents do get a bit more powerful as you kind of move down the tiers, and they're locked. One other thing to note here is they're locked by your character's average base stats. So 150 is the max base stats you can get. This is an average of all 4 of those. So you need at least 30 average of all 4 base stats here. 60, 90, 120, and 150. So you're limited in your ability to move down the tiers based on those base stats that you have. And the tier 5 talents are the most powerful. So the recommendation would be to try to move down fully into tier 5 and do like a 5-3 split. But there's so many different strategies you can do here. But just keep in mind that there's only 8 points available here. You can read through them. We won't go through that in detail here just because it's going to be a bit too granular. But anything on talents that is also worth noting, or was that pretty clear?
That's pretty clear. I would say that just like, best way to like battle, best way to like, not, I don't want to say battle, but protect, I would say is like, yeah, I think you gave us kind of a little bit of a good understanding and building kind of like building the empire almost in the sense, but
yes,
at the same time, keeping the empire is what I'm trying to get at.
Exactly. No, that's a really important point. Yep. For sure.
Yeah, man. I think if you want to keep going, I would say like you flipped a little bit through the marketplace. Do you want to get into the game a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So let's head back there. So I just wanted to like kind of close this part out, the training ground. again, like this is where you're going to progress your character. Like this is going to help you the most as you progress your character regarding the stats, regarding the talents. Keep in mind the crafting and the gems; those also help along the way. And now, kind of just moving back into the game. So we touched on dungeons. We don't really need to look at the mythics too much. Those are, as I mentioned previously, just a riskier version of the dungeon. So the negative events are a little bit more severe, but the loot is also more severe. I guess like really quickly, I will touch on this last one here. So this one's really neat. So the arena. Also, by the way, there's music. I have the music turned off, but each dungeon, mythic, and raid has its own audio clip. And the music is actually really, it's really nice and it's really relaxing. So I'd recommend checking out the music in each of the dungeons.
Yeah, you could turn it on and put it on like a low setting so that like we could speak over it if you want.
Let me see. Let me see if it will play through. Can you hear that?
No. I think okay. Yeah, it's okay.
All right, I'll keep the suspense then. The music is great. Go check out the music. All right, let me jump back here into the arena. So the one thing I just want to call out here, as I mentioned, like the loot tables are different for each of the dungeons. So you'll want to go through, look at each of the loot tables. You'll see that the loot here is extremely OP. You can see by the colors, you can see legendaries, you can see like heroic, but you'll see that some of these sell for a lot more gold. Like this bad boy sells for 7,400 gold. This is like the top resource that you can get in Dungeons and Mythics. These are like the best gems in the game that you can get as well. And you'll see that the gems, I didn't mention this before, but they actually have a range that they can fall in. So you could get, for example, a Vitality gemstone that has 30 stats one time, and your next one might have like 38. So there is a range there to keep in mind if you're trying to min-max. And these legendary ones are all 50. These are locked behind a talent. So that's worth keeping in mind. But these are like the best, highest stat that you can get for gems as well. And then the one thing I wanted to call out before we go into the raids is this chance of death. So if this rolls, it means your character is permanently killed and he's burned forever. So we have these different loops in the game where it's completely optional. Like you don't have to do the arena if you don't want to, but know that some of these negative risks or negative events are quite risky and they can be impactful. So keep that in mind. If this rolls, your character is dead, you can reduce that percentage. There's also unique items that help you completely eliminate that negative event entirely. But just keep that in mind as you go through. I'd recommend just kind of scrolling over everything, reading what they mean. It'll help give a lot of context. All right, let's jump into raids. So raids are a lot more intricate than dungeons and mythics. And just at a high level there, what I'll explain is that in dungeons and mythics, you're basically guaranteed to be successful. The only chance of being unsuccessful is those negative events. But like a large majority of the time, you're going to be successful. When we talk about raids, it's a completely different ballgame. Like your strategy is going to mean so much. The way you play it, there's going to be so many choices that you can make. In Dungeons and Mythics, you're really limited based on the talents that you choose and also the equipment that you have on. But those are effectively your limitations. In raids, if I jump into raids here, you'll notice a few things off the bat that instead of one boss, it's 3. So each raid will have 3 bosses that you need to kill. You need to kill them in chronological order, and you can choose how many you kill. But for example, here, you'll see this is Black Maw. So this is the first boss. This is Sir Malik. He's the second boss. And this is Nexarion. This is the third boss. And if you see here, this tent, it's glowing. You can actually click on it. And this is a lot of helpful information. So this kind of breaks down all of the bosses. But even before we talk about the bosses, in order to do raids, you need this key. And this key can only be found in the third mythic. Again, that third mythic, the arena, does have a chance of death. So you got to weigh the pros and cons there. But you can also, there's something called golden feathers, which you can acquire from the fortune talent. They'll drop in the dungeons if you have that talent. And that's another way you can convert those into raid keys. So those are the 2 ways that you can get raid keys in order to do raids. Now, the boss breakdown is super important to understand here. So we talked through the 3 bosses. Here's the chronological order of them. You'll notice that each of them is slightly more difficult than the previous one. So Black Maul, you'll see, has 1200 combat and 1200 health. That means that after you've done 1200 damage, you've killed Black Maul, right? Sir Malik has 1800, meaning he has 1800 health and he won't die until you've done at least 1800 health. And Nexarion has 2400. Now, there are some recommendations here. More specifically, you should ideally have a minimum of 3 characters. You don't need to, but if you have 3 characters, the minimum would be about 400 to 450 combat and about 400 to 450 vitality. You can kill Black Maul with just 1 character, but that character needs to be extremely powerful. So just keep that in mind. Now, the negative events, as we talked about, they're pretty similar here as well. So you'll see each boss has 3 negative events. The item break means that your weapon and or offhand will break and it must be repaired until you repair it, those stats will not add any value for that weapon. So for example, if you had a weapon that gives you 250 fortune, if it breaks, you're no longer getting that 250 fortune until you repair. Unique item break, if you have a unique item in that 3rd slot equipped, there's a chance that it permanently breaks, can no longer be used, it's erased for forever. So you got to be cautious about which which unique items you bring as well. And then each of the bosses has like a unique negative event. The first is Purge. So this reduces all 4 of your base stats by 10 points. So for example, if you had 150 in all of them, it would bring you down to 140. For Sir Malik, if you're wrecked, it brings all of those 4 base stats down to 1. So if you have 150 in all 4 of them, you're now back down to 1. And then as we talked about death, so Nexarion has death. If you die, then you're permanently, your character's removed entirely from the game. There are some caveats here with death as well. So the priest class actually has a chance to roll on saving characters that will be killed. So if you have a priest in your party, which we'll talk about here shortly, then he can help save you from death. And then the last part here is all the loot that the bosses have. They have mostly the same loot, but they just drop at different percentages. So we have the loot here that can be sold for tokens, right? Take these to the loot exchange. You can sell them for tokens. Here's the resources that you need for crafting, the tier 8, tier 9, and tier 10. These are potions that you can use while you're going through the raid. So there's a health potion that restores some health. There's a damage potion that increases your damage for the following boss. And there's a combat potion that increases your combat for the following boss. And the only difference really is that lottery ticket item across the bosses. So the Black Maul has the pirate hat, sells for 1,113 gold. Sir Malik has the royal signet ring, which is 2,227 gold. And then Nexarion has the black mail letter, which is 4,453 gold. And then the only difference that Nexarion has is the Banner of Valor. So this is a unique item that, while equipped, increases your vitality in raids. All right.
I got a question for you before you head over to the next one. Is what would you say is the time or investment in time to get to this stage, like progression wise for a player there?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's a couple different answers to that. I would say that most players will probably spend their time in Dungeons and Mythics for quite a while before they can make it to raids. We're talking, and that variable kind of depends, right? So this is the second part of it, is like, if you're playing the game with 1 character, it's going to take you a lot longer to get into raids than if you were playing the game with 40 characters, right? So you're just able to compound those gains a lot quicker if you have more characters. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is that you could technically go to Jupiter and you could get gold. And you, as you were talking about before, you can go to the item marketplace, you can buy the best weapon, you can buy the best offhand, you can immediately purchase all your base stats, you can purchase your talents, and you're ready to go within minutes, maybe an hour or two once you get everything set up. So there's 2 different paths that you can take. You can either kind of go through and grind yourself, and that's obviously going to take a little longer, or you can go and get some gold and kind of jumpstart that progression much quicker.
Cool. Yeah, I think it was cool to hear that kind. Sorry, I'll let you keep progressing because I know you were in a flow, but I just figured I wanted to ask.
No, yeah, that's great. Feel free to stop me anytime. That was a great question. Now, I'm just going to jump screens really quick. I'm going to go back to raids. Now, the important thing with here, this is also, I'm just going to leave this up because this is a nice little tutorial. I won't read this line by line, but these are some important things to understand with raids as well. So unlike Dungeons and Mythics, which are individual characters, a raid is actually a party of characters. So you can have 1, 2, or 3 of your own characters in that party. And you can save your parties so that you don't have to like recreate them every time. But like after every raid session ends, they'll stay in the same party. So that will help as well. As I kind of mentioned before, so combat will allow you to do more damage to the bosses. The more damage you do, the quicker the bosses die, the more health that you have for the following bosses, right? And as I mentioned, the vitality is equal to the health. So if you have 200 vitality, it means you have 200 health. Once your 200 health reaches 0, you're defeated. If you're defeated, and this is also different than Dungeons and Mythics, then you'll lose all of your loot, right? So let's say you killed Black Maul, the first boss. You get some loot from Black Maul. You decide to go and try to kill Sir Malik, the second boss, but he defeats you. That means all the loot that you just got from Black Maul is gone, right? So there are some strategic decisions there for you as well. Like after you defeat Black Maul, you can either choose to continue with that risk, or you can return to Night Vale, which means you take all of your loot and your spoils and you get to go back home with that. So there's some pros and cons there. I think like once we release the leaderboards, which I'll touch on a bit more as well, it will influence some kind of strategies and game plans there as well. And then I mentioned the potions. So after the first boss, you'll be able to use potions if you want. You don't need to, it's optional. And you can only use one type of potion for each character. So for example, like that first character in the party cannot use all 3. You have to choose between the health, damage, or combat. But you can do different potions for the different party members as well. So there's a bit of strategy there too. And then I'll come back to the leaderboard. I'll kind of close out with that because that's coming soon. But all of this kind of drives into what will be the raid leaderboard. Now, if I click on Black Maul, the first boss, so this is effectively what I'll see. So I'll see a lot of the same details that we went over. So the combat and the health of Black Maul, the negative events that would occur if I fail. Again, one other difference between raids and Dungeons and Mythics is these negative events will not occur unless I hit 0 health. So if you're playing strategically, you can actually avoid being defeated. And if you're not defeated, you have no downside, no risk. Right. So trying to find that balance of like, what do you need to be to kill that next boss? And, how do you safely return without getting any of those negative events is also sort of like a mini game in and of itself. Now, you see, I can set up parties here. These are my inactive parties. A few things, and these are a little bit more in depth, but you'll notice that the 3 slots each give a different bonus. So you'll see slot 1 gives 15 additional vitality, which effectively means 15 additional health. Slot 2 gives 15 additional combat. And then slot 3 gives 10 luck and 10 fortune. So you can also move your characters around here to try to like min-max. Like maybe you want one of your characters to have more health than the other. Maybe you want, your strongest like let's say warrior to have the most combat so he does the most damage or even more damage. So there's ways to kind of play around with that. When I go to add a character, this is where there's a differentiation in the actual classes as well. So in Dungeons and Mythics, I mentioned that it's more theming, but in raids, each character has their own stats that they give. So the warrior, you get 15 combat. For the marksman, you get 10 fortune and 10 luck. The mage, you get +5 damage. And then for the priest, you get 15 vitality. So there's also some strategy there. Like there may be a makeup of classes that may get you a specific strategy, or maybe you want to stack a certain class because maybe you want all your characters to have, plus 15 vitality, for example. So you have a little bit of leeway of strategy there. Like you can decide on the classes that you want in your party, and you can also decide in what slots you want those characters. I'll pause there. Any questions? I know that was quite a lot to dig in.
Yeah, no, I think I think the question that I have is just like, how do you build the ultimate team, right? Like,
Yes.
Because I think like, man, like I start thinking just what it will take, right? Like,
yeah,
it seems like there's so many odds or like so many chances, but yet like, is there really, right? Like that's just the thing that has me kind of like thinking at while you're like kind of scrolling through it.
Yeah, it's really good. So it's kind of a loaded question too, and I'll kind of tackle it in a few different ways. So let me explain a little bit more about like how the raid works, and that might help you with that question a bit. And then we could also like talk about the talent trees a bit more too, because I think that will kind of help drive a little bit better like understanding about the different talent trees and whatnot. But let me explain how the raids work conceptually. So you go into this raid. Let me send them off. So first, before I send them off, you'll see I have my characters here. My first one has 574 health because I have 574 vitality. Second one has 399 health. And my third one has 684 health. Now, I just randomly put those in the slots. There's probably a better way to kind of organize those into the specific slots for those boosts. But that's just what I put in for now. You'll notice that here's my weapons, my offhand, and my unique item. And I have a unique item here for this guy. You'll see these are just like identifiers. So this is the average of all 4 stats. This is just my combat vitality divided by 2. So it kind of gives you a better visual cue of like where your characters are from a progression perspective. And then the last thing you'll see is these little labels at the bottom here. So you'll see like, for example, this first character, he's getting 15 vitality. That's because he's in that first slot. So he's getting that slot bonus, but he's also getting the 10 luck and the 10 fortune being a marksman. So the class bonus, right? So this is another way to kind of like identify, how you want to structure them into these different slots. Now, when I send them off, what actually happens, this is in a lower environment, so it's going to be extremely quick. We're going to have to wait a minute, but essentially what's happening now is the characters are fighting the boss, and the characters will go through a series of rounds, and I'll show a battle report after this to kind of show what that looks like. But in every round, each character gets 1 attack, and the boss gets 2 different attacks. He has a single target attack, which always targets the lowest health character, worth keeping in mind. And then the second attack he has is an AoE attack that hits all 3 characters. At the end of each round, there's also environmental damage. So think of this as like an acid rain or like fire falling from the sky, but each character is getting hit with this environment damage, right? So it's important to think about like those logistics, because knowing that the boss will always focus on the lowest health target, it may make you think about like the equipment that you're putting on, or like, the different stats you have in each of your characters. But here, let's claim this. And I'll show you this screen here. So this shows I killed the boss. I did not lose, or none of my characters were defeated. So this kind of gives me a breakdown. It's quite a bit of information at first, but like once you understand it, it's a little easier to digest. But you'll see like the aggregated details here on the top left. This shows how many total boss kills. Like if I had multiple parties, this would be a little bit more valuable. This shows how much total damage was done, total health loss, any characters defeated, total value of all the token items that I got. And here's all the loot that I found as well. So you'll see some like resources here. Here's a minor health potion. And on the actual characters themselves, you'll see their health, how it's been reduced based on the fight with the boss. You'll see that the potions here, which we'll talk about shortly. Now, you'll see something called the battle report. And this gives a breakdown, as I was mentioning, like each of the rounds. So you'll see, the warrior landed a full damage attack to Black Maw for 186 damage. The marksman did a full damage aim shot for 178. That difference is because there's a little bit of difference in combat, and there's a little RNG as well. But you'll see they also went before Black Maw. They took their turn before. So combat also drives your position in attacking, which is important because you might be able to kill the boss, before one of the new rounds like fully begins. So you'll save a little health for the following bosses. But you'll see Black Maul did a glancing. So this is a partial single target attack to the warrior because he was the lowest health. And then did a AoE attack to all three characters. So the warrior, the marksman, and the mage all took damage there. And then you'll see, let's see here. Yeah, so the mage does his damage glancing, so it's partial. And then there's some environmental damage. And there were 3 total rounds, so I can pan through all the rounds. But you'll see that the very end, the mage did a full damage fireball, and then Black Maul was defeated. So Black Maul reached 0 health. None of these characters reach 0 health, and that explains why they're not defeated. And now this is where you kind of have a choice. So you can return to Night Vale, which means you keep all that loot as I was mentioning before, or you can move forward into the next boss. I'm pretty confident that I'll lose to the next boss, but I'll just show that to kind of end this. But you'll see here before I do that, you'll see the different potions that I can use here. So for example, I can, if I have potions, I can use them, or I can pay gold to use a potion. So if I do this, I'll go from 495 to, what's that, 510. So I'll heal really quick. So you see I'm at 510 now. Maybe I want to use like a damage potion on this guy. I'll use the potion, damage potion, and maybe I want to use a combat potion on this guy. So I'll use that potion. Now, again, I could return to Night Vale. I can keep all that loot. I'm going to send them into the second boss. They're probably going to get crushed. And let me just show this. And then I know we're coming to time too, so I'll look to wrap up here shortly as well. But yeah, you'll see didn't kill any bosses and all 3 characters were defeated. So all reached 0. I didn't get any negative events, at least fortunately. So the chance of those negative events did roll. It was unsuccessful. So I was just defeated, but you'll see all the loot was removed. So now I'll go back to Night Vale with my head hung low and have to rethink my strategy for the next time. But anyways, I'll kind of like bring that back. I know we're coming up to time. Any questions that you have based on any of that?
No, I think it's I think it's been really cool to just kind of like see it from your perspective and like giving us these insights, because I think we've been involved and tried DeFi Dungeons many times, and I think it's just really cool to hear like how you could actually level up. Like this player guide is like the ultimate player guide that you just gave us.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that. And also just kind of like a shout out, like, yeah, definitely feel free to check us out. So dungeons.game to access the game. You can find the characters on Tensor, Magic Eden, or even our in-game NFT marketplace. And then just feel free to jump in our Discord community. We have a lot of friendly community members, moderators that are extremely intelligent and can help as well. So, if you're new and you feel like it's a little overwhelming, feel free to jump in Discord. We also have a Git book as well that you could read through for some more context too.
Yeah, totally. I think like YouTube guides and like all that have been real helpful, especially like during season 1. And I think like now, man, this is like the ultimate one that we got to like build out. But yeah, amazing. I think it's been awesome stream. I appreciate you even taking the time and like hanging out for like the past 44 minutes or so, and like dedicating yourself to giving us like this kind of like background of like everything. I guess maybe you want to give us like maybe like a quick like 1 minute on like what's the future and like what's kind of like the roadmap, maybe, if whatever you can say, of course, not like, we don't want to get you in trouble, but anything that you can say upcoming that we should kind of make sure we have our notifications on.
Absolutely. So the first one that's upcoming in the next coming weeks is, we just talked about raids, so you understand conceptually how those work. We're going to integrate raid leaderboards. So players are going to compete against one another to get the highest ranking on the leaderboard so that they can get the best rewards. The higher the ranking, the better the rewards. And we'll run a few of those leaderboards. Probably, and like I said, we'll probably kick the first one off in the next few weeks or so. But that will give a little incentive for those to want to try to push 2 raids and kind of get familiar with it, kind of get prepared for it. And that's the next thing coming that's in the very near future. And then following that, we'll have a PvP gameplay type as well. So likely something similar to like a battleground or an arena. We're still working through the logistics of that. but that will come after raid leaderboards as well.
Yeah, man, excited for what you guys are cooking. Excited to keep seeing you guys cook. Well, man, I guess everybody that's watching, hit the DeFi Dungeons on Twitter. Make sure you get the notifications and give everybody the website to make sure that it's the right one.
Yeah, of course. So dungeons.game. So right here, top here.
Perfect. Dungeons.game. Yep. Awesome. Well, man, Greg, appreciate you taking the time again, and excited for the future. And we're gonna have to run it back, man. We're gonna see how well you're progressing and how well I'm progressing after today's studies.
Sounds good, man. Yeah, keep me updated. Love to stay in touch.
All right, Greg. Have a good one, man. Take care.
All right. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.